All right, Mike, you want to get going?
Sure. So, okay, I guess we'll get started. Well, welcome everyone to the Unofficial Sitecore 8 webinar series session number 3. Just a friendly reminder, we are recording this and we will share the video once we process it afterwards. We definitely want to let you know that questions are welcomed. You can get to us on Twitter at SC University as the hashtag, and you can send tweets directly to me or Akshay or any of the panelists here. So just another friendly reminder, I know you guys are all excited about, going to Sitecore India, which is being held in Bangalore on the 1st and 2nd of August of this year. We definitely want to, see some guys out there and some gals, see you guys and gals. Come on by, eat some curry with us and, let's have a great time. We have fun-filled packed speakers and lots of stuff to share, so come on down and, well, buy your tickets first and then come on down. All right, so who are we? Well, I'm Mike Reynolds. I'm here with actually Sura. We're both MVPs. We've been working with Sitecore for about 9 years in different settings with partners and clients. If you need to get in touch with us, here are our details. Visit our blogs. We write a lot of good stuff, and you can always ping us on there as well. So if you guys don't know about the Sitecore Community Slack, basically you probably should, because this is the place where you can get real-time Sitecore help or even have a great laugh with over, close to about 1,000 people in the Sitecore community from around the world. There's never a dull moment here. Come on by. If you need to join, you can reach out to Akshay or I, and we will help you get on. All right, so what's the purpose of this? So basically, over the past 9 years, Akshay and I have both been working with onshore and offshore people in the Sitecore world. And definitely one thing that we've noticed is that there's not a lot of training opportunities for some offshore people. So they may get stuck on a Sitecore project for the first time and they don't know what they're doing, and they make lots of mistakes. And the unfortunate thing is there's no time to stop and learn new things. So we decided to come up with this series of training sessions to help the community out, to say, hey, these are the things that we've learned, these are the things that the pain points that we've discovered, and this is how we attack things moving forward. So we are bringing this to you, and definitely hope that it helps you out in your Sitecore career and on development. Honestly, one doesn't simply master Sitecore. It really takes a lot of learning, experimenting, and building on in order to understand what's going on. So don't feel if you feel overwhelmed after each session, don't worry. There's a lot of material here. You're not just going to learn it overnight. It's going to take time. So really the best way to learn is repetition, and that's what we hope to accomplish by having these sessions. Seriously, what we're trying to do is prevent something like this. So you'll build something, you deploy it out there, maybe into integration or even QA, and then nothing works. Oh, but it worked on my machine. Well, we can't have that happening. Seriously, it's a whole team process. We need to actually, have things work when we build it for clients and even for ourselves. Next slide. All right, actually, it's all you.
All right, no problem. So this is kind of a very interesting topic for us, both serialization as well as ORM. So we'll be going over what serialization is, some of the tools on the market, trying to talk through a couple of these. Again, each one of these we could take and expand it to an hour-long session and things like that, but we don't have time for it, and hopefully we'll be able to cover this topic again in an advanced scenario in the coming sessions. So the first part is serialization. So serialization, what is it? So essentially, we have our code, and I'm taking a quote right out of Kemp's book is that we have the code, which is great, but in order for us to be able to work and collaborate together, it's kind of important that we are able to share the items as well in Sitecore. So instead of doing the DB, backups and things of that sort, you just serialize Sitecore items as files. And Sitecore by default has this ability. It's just a matter of how easy it is for us to deal with those files. So once you're able to generate these serialized files, it's easy for us to check it into source control, share it with other developers, and it makes our lives a lot easier even when deploying to different environments. So you don't have to create packages. And I'll show you the base Sitecore serialization in a little bit. So the next one is developing with shared DBs, and just on the panelists alone, I can name a couple who will beat me up on this, but there's in the olden days, and even some people today, there's a big divide of some developers who use a shared database. So essentially, what that means is you have one set of Sitecore databases and multiple developers work on it. That's how it was done in the past, and some people still do it till today. And then there's a different methodology for the other part of the developers who locally work on their own set of databases. They serialize it, sync it to their source control. Some other developer who's working on it picks it up, um, locally serializes it back into their local instance, does the diff, the whole shebang. It might add a little bit of overhead in the second scenario. It is definitely a little bit painful, but overall, at the end of the day, it's your preference as well as how you're doing the deployments, how convenience comes into play. I am not, just like Donald Trump and Hillary, I'm not going to speculate on which I use. People I work with know which one I use. But anyways, that's that. With the tools on the market, there's TDS, which is a Hedgehog product, and Sean will be demoing that, and then Unicorn with Rainbow, which Cam does, and he'll be showcasing that today, so you'll get a flavor for those two. With regards to the serialization, I just wanted to quickly show you if my thing hasn't timed out yet, which it did. And the password is B. All right, so for Sitecore serialization, like I mentioned, this ability is inside of Sitecore by default. There's nothing extra you need to do to get it. So once you're logged into Sitecore, you just need to make sure you have the um, developer tab open, and then just to show you, so this is my data folder for that specific instance. Notice that there is, certain number of items in it. I want to point out is there is no serialization folder at this moment in time. But if I were to just say serialize this specific item, which is just the home item, I could serialize the entire tree if I needed to. You'll see that it'll create the serialization folder. It's in the master database, Sitecore content, so you can see the hierarchy of where the item was. And if I were to open this specific item, and of course, the window opens in another screen. So this is the home item at this moment in time. It has some crucial piece of information which will help us take this item, put it on someone else's machine and deserialize it. So obviously we need all the fields and their values, as well as unique identifiers for what the item is, as well as individual fields. This is what Sitecore gives it to you by default. As you can see, it's just text formatted with a whole bunch of values, and this is where it kind of gets complicated when you start dealing with multiple items. There's a lot of content inside of it, and you could imagine the complexity of serialization and deserialization and using on different machines. So that's what serialization is in that term. And we'll be going through that. So the next topic we'll be covering is, and I want to give a shout out to Mike for this animated GIF. It's my favorite. Anyway, so what's an ORM? ORM traditionally is an object relational mapping. It used to be used to have a SQL in the back end and have like a database model in front of it for us to deal with it. Now, in Sitecore terms, honestly, for myself, I have never, if you give me a straight ASP.NET site, and I say this all the time, my brain can't wrap around using ADO like we did a long time ago, so it's kind of hard. I'm so used to using an ORM in Sitecore space, and even with the Sitecore API, it kind of gets really difficult to do like the base Sitecore API or SQL queries. So an ORM helps us in that way. Now, there's two different kinds of them on the market at this moment in time, a mapper and a wrapper. A wrapper is essentially very simple. It wraps around a Sitecore item. So what you get with a Sitecore item, which is its properties as well as its children, anything you can do with an item, it would be very easy for you to do with a wrapper. A mapper, on the other hand, does not wrap around a Sitecore item. So it doesn't have any relationship with a Sitecore item. And in this specific using a mapper, if you're trying to use an entire template to do something, it's different. So there's a couple of blog posts out there about if I'm rendering just the title of an article, I don't need the entire item for it. So you have to appropriately use your models. For one, I love manually creating models. A lot of people don't because they either don't like it or they think, why do I need to create a model? But I create all my models manually, and that's a habit. And I was taught anyway. So this, for the tools on the market, will be going through Fortis, Synthesis, which are both wrappers, and then we'll be going through Glass, which is a mapper. So Mike Edwards will do Glass, Richard Seal's going to do Fortis, and Cam's going to do Synthesis. So with that, I am going to go ahead and give the control over to Sean, and he can do the TDS for us. There you go. Sean, you're the presenter.
Cool, thanks Akshay. I should just be presenting now. Let me know, can you see my screen? I hope this is working.
Yep, I can see your screen, Sean.
Excellent. Cool, thank you. All right, so TDS is a Visual Studio plugin for Sitecore development where essentially we use the serialization that comes within Sitecore to pull items into your source control. And therefore, as Akshay said, you can have your code and your items side by side. This is very important in Sitecore development because items often rely on code. So for instance, your renderings will point to specific files like a CSHTML, or maybe a rule will point to a DLL. So this sort of link is crucial that we have in our development. We actually put our code and our items together. With TDS, you can visit the website here, www.teamdevelopmentforsitecore.com. It is a paid plugin for Visual Studio. However, we do offer a free trial, so you can come up here and click on the link. And once you visit this link, we offer a 30-day free trial. You can see the sort of savings that we find with TDS for all sorts of clients that pick it up. And we'll go through like a lot of the details about how you save that money. A lot of it is essentially the time about how serialization is taken into account, plus all these other things that TDS comes with it. So if you have any questions about sales, licensing, or anything like that, please visit our website. Contact us through sales@hedgehogdev.com. That's for hedgehogdevelopment.com. And we can discuss that more with you. Cool, so I'll just jump over into Visual Studio now. And essentially what TDS is these project files within your solution. So here we're actually combining our code up here with our TDS projects down here. And you can see this sort of structure shows us essentially the items that we have developed for this project. So we don't have things like every item in Sitecore in here. We don't need that. We've only got the things that we've changed, the things that we've updated. So essentially we can build these out to a Sitecore instance and create that consistency across all environments. Now this is the launch Sitecore site, and if I jump back over to launch Sitecore, here is our content file, our content structure. I'm just going to go in, we can see launch Sitecore, and say I go to team member, and I'm going to actually just create a new field here. So let's just add a new field called sport, and we'll just keep that as a single line text field. Now I've added this sport field in, and I'm going to go to now one of our team members, and we're just going to change that. So Brandon Royal, let's say he likes soccer. Now these changes are currently in my Sitecore instance. If I jump back into Visual Studio, we can see here that the fields don't currently exist. And what team development for Sitecore allows is that you can right-click here and do Get Sitecore Items. Now we can just expand this out, and there is our new sport field. I'm just going to pull that one in. Okay, and essentially this field is an item itself. So hopefully we've learned that from the previous Sitecore University tutorials as well. But we've pulled in this item. We can even right-click on this and go View Code. And you can see that this is that .item file that was presented by Akshay before. It's all of the contents for that particular item in Sitecore. It now exists in my solution. Right, so we've managed to do that, but we also made a change to our content. I can come up here and okay, well, what is different between the file system that I have here, all the serialized items in my TDS project, and my Sitecore instance? So I can click on Sync with Sitecore, and this goes through and compares everything, and you can see here Brandon Royal has got a Sitecore item newer, and there is that value of soccer that we can bring in. So we can either select this Update Project, so this will pull the value of Sitecore into our project. Also these buttons are sort of quick links that do the same thing. So that does that, and we do updates. And once we've done that, we can go to our team. We can see that there's some sort of change here. If we were to view code and do a quick look, there is that soccer field for sport has been added to our file. So that's essentially what TDS does, is this basic serialization. That's how TDS started initially, and TDS has been around for many, many years. It's become it became the go-to for Sitecore development because of the manual process involved with packaging, with dealing with items on shared DB servers and things like that. That TDS really shone through with this idea that everyone can develop on their own system and use items like code, just as files, and then check them all in together in your source control systems. Now, because that was the way that TDS started, essentially that's all you need to start. You can come along here and you can click and just enter the details of your local Sitecore instance to be able to connect and then be able to pull in those items. The other thing that we can do is we can actually deploy your code as well. So in this sort of simple setup, now I've already done it here, and I won't take too much time to do it again, but what you can do here, we've got all of our code and our items together. A simple right-click, deploy solution, would go and build all of our code and deploy all of our items from our TDS project, and therefore get developers up and running super quick. Now, if you want your code to build, then you would come over to the General tab, and you can see here that I've selected a source web project. This then tells TDS, okay, let's build that project and all its related projects as well, and build that out to our system. So we can see here that already with two basic steps in TDS, you've got the ability to serialize items, and you've got the ability to build your projects together as one. If you don't want that, if you've got your own system for doing the builds and deploying the code, you just keep this selected as none and it won't do any updates. Right, so I think with that, this is one of the things that TDS has been around for years. However, we don't rest on what we've got out there. We're constantly talking to the community, constantly talking to our clients, and finding what they want to see as well. And we try to extend TDS almost every year, sometimes even less than every year, to enhance it with more and more features to help development. So one of those features that I want to demo is code generation, right? So Akshay mentioned ORMs before, and soon you'll hear about some different ORMs out there. Now, with code generation, you can actually automate it to look at these items, like your templates, and say, generate some code for me, generate those models for me. Now, if I just go up here, launch Sitecore, go to data models, I'm just going to quick search for sport. We can see that by pulling that item in, we've automatically produced this property on our team member item. Now that's pretty cool because this happened automatically and no one actually knew this was updating. So I'm just going to demo that again here. Now here I'm over in Sitecore Rocks, and Rocks works well with TDS. We go to our team member item, and I'm going to add another, let's do hobby. Okay, that can be our new field. I'm going to save that, and you can see here that Visual Studio is thinking, and something's reloaded. Essentially what's happened here, I've automatically updated it. Hobby has automatically been pulled into my project through serialization, and when I go to my code, I've automatically pulled in that parameter, that property, sorry, for our code generation. Now that was pretty cool because now I can just simply go here, and depending if my IntelliSenses are updated properly, I can go HTML. I'm using Glass Mapper for this example, but you can use any ORM that you wish. And I'm just going to X. Whoops. Got, and it looks like it hasn't updated. You get the ability to just do your model like that. Right, and you see this is built. This is all right. I'm just going to build that out. And I'm just going to jump back over here while this is loading. Go into Experience Editor. Now, I just did a build then, but essentially what's happened is we've got these fields already in Sitecore, and now I've just improved the view for the biography of a team member with a new property that we just added. We'll jump back here, and of course the demo has gone wrong because I didn't do a sacrifice to the demo gods. Essentially this works. I've had a couple of troubles this morning, just particularly with this project, but we see the ability here to have IntelliSense work. So hobby, that was a new field that we added, and essentially we get that ability right there to use our code generation as well. Just to jump back, this was one of those things that you don't need. So turn it on if you like. If you don't want to use it, don't use it. You can come over, you can combine projects here, you can add package validation to upload packages before. Update packages is another one where we take the serialized items and build a Sitecore.update package. Right? So again, if you want to use it, use it. If you don't, don't. Deploy properties was new in the latest version of TDS, where you get the ability to publish after a deploy. So when you do that right-click deploy solution, you can save events, publish after the deploy, update linked database, whatever you'd like, and so much more. That's the thing with TDS, is all of this is configurable. If you want to use the features and really enhance your development environment, you can turn them on. If you don't, leave them off. You can even come to the settings dialog here and use things like auto-sync, where instead of updating in Rocks to bring that item in, you can actually just update that in Sitecore and it automatically comes in. Content file sync, where you actually update an item like that view and it automatically gets copied over to your project, so you don't need to do an app pull reset and reload the actual system as well. So all of this is available. I hope I haven't gone over time, but essentially what we want to really detail here is that Sitecore has the ability to use serialization. TDS utilizes that serialization functionality to pull it into your own project and push that into source control. And that's how TDS started. And since then, we've had so many other more features been added to TDS through community feedback and client requests that we've now got the ultimate tool for Sitecore development. On top of that, with your license, and my local Sitecore is broken at the moment, we've got our website, teamdevelopmentforsitecore.com. You can find this solution under my GitHub, where Launch Sitecore TDS is the repository. Hedgehog itself, we have our repository of shared code, so extensions on TDS as well are possible. We should share that code out to the community. We also have the issue with .item files. We have an item merge tool. So instead of having to deal with that text file, that horrible looking text file we saw earlier, we actually have a merge tool to help developers when merging those .item files. This saves a lot of hassle further down the track. And you'll hear different things about other tools, how they deal with it. Later you'll hear Cam talk about Unicorn and how they deal with the serialization merge issues. This is the way that TDS has done it, and it's available with your TDS license as well. If you want to learn more about TDS, send us an email, jump on Twitter, ask us questions. We've also got our YouTube channel with all sorts of short videos on all of the features available. And also reach out to myself. I'm at Sean Holmesby on Twitter. I'm on Slack. Any sort of way that you've got of getting in contact with me, ask me any sorts of questions you'd like, and we can talk to you about licensing costs and all the features that come with TDS as well. All right, so I'm sort of getting sick of hearing my own voice, and I think I might be able to hand that back for now.
All right, thanks so much, Sean. All right, so we just saw a demo of TDS, which helps us in many ways. So now we're going to go to Mike Edwards, who's going to do a glass demo for us. Mike, I'm going to give you the presenter shortly. Yep, there you go. Hey, Mike, you there? We can't hear you. Mr. Edwards. Hey, Mike, we can't really hear you. We can see your screen, but we can't hear you. Maybe you press the mute on your headset, not sure. All right. Mike, you there? All right. Until we get stuff figured out with Mr. Edwards, I'm going to try to go to the next one, which is synthesis. I hope, Cam, you're ready for this. Let me just dump you in. Hold on. Hey, Cam, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, let's see. I have to figure out which monitor is which. Okay, can you guys see Visual Studio? All right. So let's talk about synthesis. Ironically, we're talking about ORM here, and synthesis is the product here that is not really an ORM per se. So Glass and Fortis both are products that allow you to essentially take a class and then map Sitecore onto it. Synthesis is sort of not really a mapper per se, because synthesis is designed to be entirely representative of your Sitecore database. So there's no mapping going on here. Synthesis is literally generating a representation of your database. It's almost more like IntelliSense for your Sitecore templates. And because of that, it is not really a mapper, because you're not, like, you can't like hand roll a model. It also means that it is the only Sitecore template mapping project that maps, that is not simply just a mapping framework, it is also a mapping as well as the code generation. So in that way, it is tightly coupled together, and it doesn't really expose a lot of customizations to the way its model works, because it is designed to be a representation of your Sitecore database state. And if you want to make a model for your actual domain model, that's great. You would take your synthesis generated model and use that as a basis. So the idea is that you would you have a copy of what you have in the Sitecore database that is generated code, and you can utilize that to make sure that you're coding against what's actually in Sitecore at the moment. So let's, without further ado, generate, let's actually use synthesis, because I would rather actually demo things than talk about them all day. So we're going to actually install synthesis.mvc. It all installs over NuGet, and you can see that under dependencies here, this is also going to install synthesis for us because it depends on it. Synthesis is designed around using Sitecore MVC as opposed to web forms. You can use it with web forms, but it doesn't have as heavy duty of a support for it. So when you install synthesis, it comes with a bunch of config files that are here under app config include, and we'll scroll through all of Sitecore's. And what you want to do to get started, it gives you this example config. When you're doing Sitecore configuration, it's generally a best practice to make what's called a patch file that allows you to essentially modify the configuration of another file that's been included without actually altering it. So in this way, when you upgrade synthesis later, if you've taken this example file, you duplicate it and rename it to .config, it means that you haven't changed any of the files that come with the package, and so you will have a very easy upgrade path later. So this file gives you sort of the basic settings that you would need to start configuring synthesis, to tell it what templates you care about generating code for. So we'll just say Sitecore templates, and let's see, we are going to do sample, and we're going to blow stuff up. But we'll fix that with a build, because we haven't built since we installed synthesis, and so it's getting a little confused about our configuration. So we'll just say training. You have to set what namespace you want your generated code to use. There are two separate types of things that synthesis generates. It generates items, which are concrete classes that actually represent an item. Generally speaking, you should never talk to those. You actually want to talk to the interfaces. The interfaces represent the Sitecore template hierarchy, and those interfaces are what you should be talking to most of the time. In fact, almost all of the time. So we'll set that up. We'll just have it set itself to the default location here, synthesis.model. And then this template path route is a little confusing. It generates namespaces based on the relative path in Sitecore to your templates. And so in this case, if I say Sitecore templates, I'm actually going to make it sample, because then that will make the root namespace relative to the sample folder that's our root here. So let's go run a build. And then synthesis exposes, blowing stuff up, obviously. Why is the file watcher grumpy? This may be an even more awesome presentation if this doesn't. Okay, well, this was working.
The demo gods aren't that friendly.
Yeah, the demo gods are not happy with me today. And unfortunately, this is what I've got to demonstrate on. and something about Sitecore is mucked up. And I just loaded this, of course, right beforehand. What is going on? Did something... Let's go and have a look. Live debugging for the win. I see the problem. I did this Sitecore setup as a really quick thing and did some silly things with the assemblies and running a build, got rid of a few things that thankfully I had it in Git, so that should fix it. Okay. So synthesis installs a control panel, which normally is at synthesis.aspx. This is a really simple thing that lets you regenerate your model when you want to do so. In this case, we'll hit regenerate, and it will go and regenerate the file that we asked it to. Actually, it probably won't regenerate the file that we asked it to because I'd commented out its config. Let's go do that again. So we'll go, and the next thing we need to do is actually bring the code into the project that we generated, and to do that we'll show all the files. And down here there's synthesis.model.cs that got generated. We'll include that, and then we'll take a quick look at it. So synthesis generates two sets of things. So we've got these interfaces, and we generated basically the standard sample page sample template that comes with a default Sitecore out of the box. So it generates this interface that's called iSampleItem, and that is the sample item template that comes with Sitecore. We added an extra template called base page just so that we would be able to show inheritance. So it makes the template inherit from the interfaces of other templates that it inherits from in the database. And so that lets you treat all of these items as a C# type hierarchy. So you can actually cast items to the expected template type, and it will work the way you'd expect it to in C#. So next, let's actually use this whole thing. We've got the sample rendering that comes with Sitecore. I've taken the standard Sitecore site and converted it to Sitecore MVC just because I like Sitecore MVC, and so this would normally be an XSLT in regular Sitecore. In synthesis, it has the synthesis.mvc project allows you to use as models any generated synthesis type and have the renderings data source be automatically provided to it. I'm sorry if that doesn't make as much sense because renderings are actually covered next time, but it'll make sense after the next session. So what we're going to do is set the model type on this to our sample item, which is the generated code for the template that we're expecting here. So right now, you're using standard Sitecore MVC rendering stuff here, so we have to put the field title or the field ID in here, which is a little ugly, but with synthesis, we can just say html.text for, and just like MVC, it has a lambda, and we're going to say title, and then we'll take the same thing here. And you have rendering stuff like this for date times, and it handles rich text automatically and all sorts of other things. Basically anything that you can do with Experience Editor you can do with this, and in some cases it's strongly typed where Experience Editor is not. So we'll render out text, and I'll go refresh the page, and it should just work. And it won't look any different, but it'll be using strongly typed renderings instead of using magic strings, which one of programming 101, you don't want magic strings. So if you change the name of a template field, for example, and you're referencing it by name, you have to go search through all of your stuff and see me break things, of course, because I don't think I actually built after I included the model. And so now we've got that rendered out. We've got two titles because I didn't get rid of these, and we've got two contents because I didn't get rid of these. But you can trust me on that one. Synthesis also gives you APIs that can be used outside of that. So this is a controller rendering, and this is using Sitecore's normal. It's very simple. It's a rendering that basically goes and gets the current item's children and then renders them out as a list. I'll go add this to this page really quickly here, and you can see what it does. I've added some sample pages under this one to render it out. And you can see that it's got a weird thing going on here. It's got this number 4 in this ordered list that's blank. And let's go take a look and see what's going on there. And that is because there's an item under here that's a folder, and it doesn't have this title field that is being rendered out. So we're looking for the title field in the rendering. And what we want to do is make sure that the item is the correct type. So what we'll do is we'll change this, and we'll use a synthesis extension method on the item. Actually, we don't need to convert that item. We need to convert the actual model. So we'll say as strongly typed collection of I-base page item. And we can say I-base page item here because we know that the base page template is inherited by all of our pages, and it contains the title field, which is the only thing we need to do here. So this demonstrates that you can actually use things as their base types and get away with it. So we need to change this model type to be our expected template type. Base page item, and then we'll change this to use text for. Well, actually, you can also just render it out this way. You could say model dot or item dot title dot rendered value is approximately the same thing. You still have to HTML.raw that so that it comes out and works in page edit mode, but it's generally ideal to use it normally. And this is going to blow up because I didn't build. So once it loads here, we have the same thing, but then our folder will disappear because when you convert a collection with synthesis, it actually ignores templates that aren't the right type. So we don't have that folder in here anymore because synthesis went and grabbed only the templates that were of the type we asked for and ignored anything that did not validate according to that. So there's one more thing you can do that makes it really easy to test this stuff if you like unit tests, and you should. So we're going to add an iRendering context, which is essentially an interface that lets you talk to the Sitecore API using synthesis types. And because everything in synthesis is a interface, you are allowed to mock it with testing frameworks really easily. I'm going to use poor man's dependency injection here. You probably shouldn't do this. You should use an IOC container normally, but that's neither here nor there. So basically, we will tell it to add a new Sitecore rendering context. So basically, we're allowing you to pass in the rendering context you want to use. So when you're testing, you can pass in something that you've generated that has a known state. But then by default, we're giving you a Sitecore rendering context, which gives you essentially synthesis wrapped functionality very similar to this Sitecore rendering context. So what we'll do is we'll replace item with rendering context.get rendering data source, and we'll say iStandard template item. That is basically the interface that everything derives from in synthesis. And then we no longer need to have as strongly typed collection of, we can do of type, which is actually standard linked to objects.
Hey,
We'll
Cam.
build that and end up with the same thing. Yeah, Akshay.
The 15 minutes for synthesis is up, so if you want to wrap it up and go into the unicorn, you can.
This is the last thing I've got, yes.
Okay, cool.
And extremely rapidly, here's some tests. And these, well, it doesn't have a reference to the website, but essentially you can go and create a fake item and a fake rendering context, and you can create fakes for everything and unit test synthesis without any sort of Sitecore context or fake DB, and normally unit testing this stuff in Sitecore is kind of difficult. So let's get rid of that. That is synthesis in a nutshell. It works exactly the same way once we've used rendering context, except now we are loosely typed instead of strongly typed, or the other way around. We're loosely coupled. Let's move over to Unicorn. So Unicorn is a serialization tool that approaches things a little bit differently. So you've seen TDS. TDS has lots of graphical interfaces and point-and-click configuration. If TDS is sort of the Microsoft Word or Visual Studio of the serialization world, Unicorn is like the Sublime Text or Emacs. It integrates with Sitecore instead of integrating with Visual Studio, so it doesn't require Visual Studio. And it's a little different in that it forces all the merges to happen on the file system. Like, there's no sync dialog. You don't have to choose what to do for pulling and pushing items, because it operates under the idea that the disk is the master copy instead of the database. So when you pull in things from another developer, you can push the state of the disk up into Sitecore, and it makes it super easy to work with things. So let's go and actually use a little bit of Unicorn. A couple of other unique things about Unicorn: it uses a custom serialization format called Rainbow that was designed to be ridiculously more mergeable in terms of text merges than the regular Sitecore serialization format. TDS has that merge tool that they showed. This stuff just merges without a tool. And Unicorn is free. It's open source, it's community driven, and I like it. Let's do stuff. So here's a copy of Visual Studio that I've got a standard Sitecore installation on. I have installed Unicorn on this out of NuGet, and I've taken, just like we did with synthesis, a example file and duplicated it, and then we'll rename it to config to enable it. So this, similar to the synthesis, you'd have to tell it what path you want to include. And in Unicorn, you do it with a predicate. There's a whole bunch of things you can do with this, but we won't have time to go into it in a lot of depth. But suffice to say, you can basically plug in and configure Unicorn just about any way you want, including changing behavior drastically. So now that we've enabled that, Unicorn, similar to synthesis, has got a control panel. It's at unicorn.aspx. And if we refresh this, we will end up having our configuration load. Hopefully this time we won't have to waste time reverting DLLs. So now we've got our training artifacts configuration, and it shows you everything that you've configured about it just to make sure that you have it the way you want it to. And you have to, because the disk is the master, the first thing you have to do is write files to the disk so that you have something to be the master. And that is copying items from the Sitecore database to the disk. So let's do that. That didn't take very long because all we were doing is just a very simple, small set of renderings. So let's go. We've got this sample rendering folder that we've placed under Unicorn. And when you load it up, if you look at the content, it'll tell you that the item is included in the Unicorn configuration. Because the disk is the master, you don't want content editors to actually be editing that item, because if it's on production or something, the next deploy using Unicorn will overwrite that. So let's create a method rendering. We'll call it training. A method rendering is kind of archaic, but it's like pretty easy to implement for this stuff. We will call it, the method will be demonstration. Sorry. The method is going to be render and will be training.demonstration. We'll save that. So now we've created this rendering, and we will go and actually add it to an item. We will allow it in our placeholder settings. So let's go we'll build this and go take a look at what just happened. So if I load up, I've got this whole thing under Git, and when I added that sample item, it actually added a file on disk for it. So here's the training item. You can see this format looks a little different than the standard Sitecore serialization format. This is based on YAML, which is a language designed to be human readable and easy to edit and understand. In this case, we realized that we messed something up. The actual item is actually called training.demo instead of demonstration. So we'll hit save on that file, and because Unicorn is using what's called transparent sync, that will actually push that change right into Sitecore without any interaction. So that change has gone straight to Sitecore because it's using this file actually to pull from. And if we go here and add a new component, we'll add our training component that we allowed, and it's going to blow up because we don't actually have this compiled. And I think we also forgot to set the assembly. Yep. So we'll save that. The demo gods are not the biggest fan of me today. How are we doing on time, Akshay?
You have 7 more minutes.
All right. So we'll add the component. And this is what happens when you install Unicorn. It gives you a beard. So we've added that template. Let's commit these items, and we'll do one more thing. We need to actually take the template that we added, the rendering we added to the home page, and make sure that that can be read by another developer. So we'll use something called New Item Only Evaluator, which lets you essentially write items that don't exist yet that have been serialized. And so that way we can allow content editors to take this homepage item that we serialized, and it will get updated if it doesn't exist, and it will not be changed if it does exist. So we'll commit all this, because what's the point if you're not working with other developers? And we'll actually push it into Git, except we won't actually push because it's a local repository. So then we've got another Sitecore instance here. This one has got the first instance as a remote, which basically means I can pull from it. So we'll fetch, which pulls new changes. We'll check out the unofficial training branch that we just had, we're on. This is what we just committed our changes to. So basically, I just did some work that was like making a feature in Sitecore and then committed it, and a different, like this is like a different developer's machine, has pulled down these changes, including my item changes. So now we'll go and load up the Unicorn control panel on our second Sitecore instance. And we'll go load up our second Sitecore project. And now we've got our training artifacts configuration that we will run a sync on. This basically pushes the state on the file system up into the database. And because I messed up the home page, that configuration didn't come across. So here we go. With that, we forgot to commit all of our stuff. We only committed part of it. So now we'll pull that across and get our content configuration. We'll go to our Sitecore 2. Desktop, once that loads up. So now we've got our training content configuration. So we brought a configuration across using source control and added it. We didn't do anything directly to this. So we'll go and sync all the things. And you'll see that nothing actually was updated, especially on the content. So if we went to the home page on Sitecore 2, we're not going to see anything. And that's because this item already existed, and so it wasn't messed with. So if I actually go and delete this home item, we'll leave the links because we're just going to make it come back. And then we need to revert our changes because deleting that item just deleted it from the file system as well. And we want our home item back. Now if we go sync because the home item doesn't exist, it's going to go and add it back in from the serialized version and then automatically publish it. So now if we go and reset this, it will complain about not being able to create that type because we haven't done a build and that demo object doesn't actually exist. This one. So now that we've built, we refresh again and we'll get that. There we go. So we've done some basic Sitecore development tasks here. We pulled across we did some development and made a rendering. We changed a piece of content that uses that rendering, and then we used source control to pull it across to a different developer's instance and essentially restore the state of the first developer's Sitecore items into the second developer's Sitecore instance. And that's at the heart what Unicorn does. There's a whole bunch more that you can do with deployments and automation, but in 15 minutes, that's about all we can cover. So that's what I've got. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Cam. All right, we're gonna try to get Mike Edwards on, see if his microphone cooperates this time. Hey, Mike, you there? Mike.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, thank you. Yes, you can.
Yay!
Okay.
So,
You can
full start.
There you go. We can see your screen.
Excellent. Right, let me get right. So, in 15 minutes, I'm going to give you the 5 W's of why you should use Glass Mapper and what Glass Mapper is. so without further ado, let's start. So we're going to look at the who, the what, the why, the where, and the when. So firstly, who. So that's going to be, who are we? Well, I'm Mike Edwards. I'm a Sitecore MVP since 2011. I've been working with Sitecore now for 9 years, so I started off around 5.2, 5.3, and I'm the founder of the project. And if you want to ask me any questions about the project, or about Sitecore in general, then you can find me on Twitter at MikeEdwards83. But I am not the sole contributor to the Glass Mapper project. We also have Nathaniel Mann. He is also a Sitecore MVP. He's been working with Sitecore for about 6 years. He is obsessed with performance. If anyone knows him personally, will probably testify to that as well. He's contributed lots of great ideas to the Glass project over the last few years, and you can find him at Cardinal252. Of course, helping us out, it's not just the two of us, there's also the entire Sitecore community. Glass is very much driven by the community. There's a big set of users out there now giving us feedback, so we've got lots of developers using it all the time, telling us where we've gone wrong, telling us where we've got right, suggesting ideas, testing it, advising us on where we can make improvements. So it's very much a project that relies on the feedback that the community gives it. And that's what makes it such an excellent project. So I said who we are, but what actually is Glass Mapper? Well, in its simplest form, you can see this here. Glass is a mapping framework. So unlike the other frameworks out there, which tend to be wrappers, Glass allows you to map data from Sitecore onto POCO objects. So we can see here we've got a hello world example, and we just have some basic .NET properties. There's nothing magic here. If you were to give this to another developer, they would instantly understand what these properties are, what types they're dealing with. It's all very transparent to the user at this point. So beyond that, it's an object relational mapper, as I said before, rather than being a wrapping solution. The project is open source. This means that anyone can contribute, or if you want to see how we do some of the things we do, you can download the source code. And if you see we've done something wrong, hopefully you will correct us and submit that as a pull request to us so we can make the project even better. As I said, it's got a large community. As you can see there, we've had 88,000 downloads across all versions. So that's from the original Glass Sitecore Mapper, which was the original name of the project before we changed the name about 2-3 years ago. The solution itself is implemented in a large number of Sitecore solutions across the world with some very big deployments as well. So it's very well tested in that sense, and it's very well proven, and it's proved very, very popular. We were also established in 2011, so we've actually now been going for almost 5 years. It was September 2011 we pushed the first release out, so we will be hitting our 5-year anniversary soon. I feel like I should order a cake of some sort. So why bother with all these ORMs or wrappers? Well, firstly, to make our code simpler. What we can see on the left-hand side is an example of writing some code using the basic Sitecore API. Main things we can see in this code. Now, we're trying to get to the Sitecore database. Once we've got an item from Sitecore, we're having to do a load of different data conversions in line with our code. So we're trying to work out what, is this item built before a certain date or not? As you can see here, we're trying to get a list of tags as well related to that item. All the time, we're calling back into Sitecore specific types which aren't easily testable. We're then, again, as I say, we're trying to do this data conversion. It makes our code hard to read because we have a mixture of business logic and data conversion mixed into one. Whereas with Glass, because we can use POCO objects that are strongly typed and all that is managed for you by Glass, you can abstract all that data management away from your business logic and focus purely on the business logic. It makes it a lot easier for anyone else who's coming in later on to debug and understand what is going on in your solution. We also want to make things testable. In my first example here, we can see we've got a reference to the Sitecore database. And traditionally, that has been very hard to test, very hard to mock up in a unit test and have it successfully run. Now, I do have to give a shout out now to the fake DB guys, the fake DB guys, who have now actually made this in some way testable. And it's an impressive piece of work they've done in their open source project to actually drill in and actually make that model or that object testable in some way. But it still does involve quite a bit of scaffolding up front. Whereas with Glass, we are interacting with Sitecore through interfaces. This means that we can easily mock all the methods on those interfaces. And also because we are dealing with POCOs, the returned objects from our interfaces are easily mockable as well, or easily scaffoldable as well. So it becomes very natural. It becomes like working with just regular C#, right? And you don't really have to jump through any real hoops in the way that you do mocking. Glass is also not a one-way framework. It's not just a read framework. With Glass, we also allow you to write to Sitecore. So this gives you the ability to actually push data back into the Sitecore database, but using strongly typed models using native .NET types. You don't have to convert things to certain field types or remember that you need to convert to a specific XML format, or if you want to write a blob, you have to open the stream first before closing it and that sort of thing. Glass will manage that for you. Oops. So before I go too far. So that's sort of some slides. So I was going to show you a bit of code, so a bit of it in the real world. So I've talked about these sort of POCO models, and here you can see again this is a POCO example. We've got my top navigation class here. If I want to pick out some fields, it's very simple. Short title and display in top menu are fields. But also if I want to get specific information about an item, such as its URL, I can just say URL. So if you don't want to do any configuration whatsoever, you can just, by simply using a convention-based approach to your models, you can keep things nice and clean and nice and POCO orientated. And then we can see here this in use. This is actually within an ASCX page, so we're going back to the web forms days. For those of you still using it, so it's worth knowing that we can use Glass with ASPX pages. And we can see here it's very easy to print things out. Getting a bit more advanced, say something with this product model, we can see here that now we're introducing bits of configuration. So for those of you who like having spaces in your field names, we can support that because you start to mark up your classes with a bit of configuration. We can see here we can deal with Sitecore complex fields, so like images. We also support link fields, stream fields, all those sort of fields. And we can also see that we're now mixing in also custom properties that are actually doing some form of logic. So here we're calculating the tax that should be paid for this item. You can also notice here that we are linking to other items in the Sitecore database as well. So your model becomes then very expressive in terms of, we're navigating across Sitecore to pull up the bits of information out of Sitecore from our model. We're dealing with very particular types, with the images and the links, but we can also mix in our standard .NET code as well with these sort of custom properties and custom methods. On the back-end logic side, this is an example of using Glass within a controller. So this is my comments controller. And you can see here I have this Sitecore context property. This is because I'm inheriting from the Glass controller. You don't have to do this, but this is a convenience class. And we can see here I can get a comments folder. I'm getting a comments folder out somewhere. I'm getting a related article, which I'm assuming is the article that somebody is currently wanting to write a comment about. Doing this, we can then get from the view, so this is a form somebody has submitted, we can get some data and save it back to Sitecore. And so in this very short piece of code, what we're talking about, probably about 20 lines of code, we are getting data from a user form, putting it into a model, and then submitting that model to Sitecore and saving that data into Sitecore. And we can see that actually in action. So this is my comment code that we saw there. This is my Sitecore instance. This is my comment section, so we can see we've only got comments from last year. It's not a very active site, clearly. So let's put some information in. Test.com. This is awesome. And if we submit that, we get a nice thank you message there. And we can see my comment has come in. All using strongly typed objects. Because it's all strongly typed objects with interfaces, you can see it's Sitecore context. We can mock that Sitecore service as well. We can then make this code testable if we wanted to in the future. Okay. So beyond that, there are a ton of features, too many to demo in 15 minutes, but as I said, we have read-write, we support Sitecore search, it's extensible, so if you have custom fields that you've created in the Sitecore, you can also create mappers that will support that. Item navigation, so you can map children and parent relationships, you can do ad hoc queries as well using your models. We support interfaces and classes, so your models don't have to be one or the other, they can be a mixture of both of those. One of the key things is that your models are completely separated from Sitecore, and that makes it a really nice environment to work with. You're not having to worry about, am I carrying this Sitecore item around in the background, and will that come and act as a surprise at some time. You're also working with native .NET types as a result of that, which just makes the whole experience a much more pleasant experience. We can also do strongly typed rendering parameters for those of you who use rendering parameters with your components. As we saw before, Sean Holmesby showed us that we can do code generation, and we use TDS to do that. But of course you can do handwritten models. You've seen how simple the models are to write, so there's no reason why you can't just sit there and type them out. And that, again, that's my preferred route, but it's not for everyone. We support both MVC and web forms, so you don't have to choose between the two. And we also have page editor support, so you get all this strongly typed modeling, all the nice POCO objects, but you don't lose page editor support. It was very key to us that whatever we implement, we don't lose the standard Sitecore models, Sitecore features, sorry. And finally, we have caching, which allows us to, well, allows you to cache the models that you've generated. So then you don't have to go back to Sitecore and do all that data loading work again. It just means that your pages will speed up and fly when they're being rendered. And finally, why? Because we all want to be happy developers, and we want to live in a nice, tested, strongly typed world rather than dealing with magic strings, and not just magic strings in terms of field names, but magic strings in terms of the way data is stored and data is accessed. Okay, so where can you get it? Well, we have a website which is at glass.lu, or you can just install the Nugget package, which is glassmapper.sc, or you can follow us at Twitter. Those are three main places to connect with us, or just connect with myself or Nathaniel as well. So when? So I would suggest you do it now. When do you want to get it? Get it now. Or maybe after this training session has finished, if you're interested in the other ones. So all that's left to say is just thanks for watching, and thanks to the guys for setting up the training sessions for everyone. Back over to you guys.
All right, thanks, Mike. All right, so we're gonna go to Richard, who is going to demo Fortis for us. Hey, Richard, you there?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you and we can see your screen.
Okay, so let me present this. How's that looking?
That looks good.
Okay. So, yeah, so we're on to Fortis, and the last one up. So a lot of what applies to the other wrappers and ORMs, so Glass and Synthesis, really do apply to Fortis as well as to why you would want to use it, and the benefits of using one of these as opposed to using just a straight classic Sitecore API and coding. So Fortis really, I guess it kind of sits a little bit in between Synthesis and Glass. It is a wrapper. It does not map in the same way that Glass does. So it is more of a representation of your database. So on the Fortis team, we've got Jason Bird. He's the original writer along with Kern, and then I joined just a couple of years ago. We have the website where you can look and get a lot of the information about the documentation. There's my blog, which I'll put posts up again about Fortis as well. And then we have it's open source, so we have the GitHub site there, and you can tweet us, ask any questions that you need to. So to get Fortis installed, it's nice and simple. It's just packages on NuGet. We have a number of different packages depending on what you want. We have the main Fortis package, MVC support, and web form support. And we have separate packages for if you want to use Lucene or Solar. We support both of those. So let's have a quick look at the code, and we can see the demo gods have been frowning on everybody today, it seems. So my front end part of this is all broken. So we'll just show you the code and see how that goes. So yeah, so if you search for Fortis, this is what I've just installed on this demo project. It's an older project that I had from a client, so it's got quite a lot of things in there, so we can delve into that. So we've installed the main Fortis project that contains just the main Fortis libraries. We've got MVC support, and for this project we're using Lucene, so we have installed the Lucene helper there. So when we set it up, very similar to Synthesis, we have a config file here, so we can look and see our config. First thing we want to set up is where our model generation or our model code is going to live, and you can have multiple assemblies in here. This just tells Fortis where we're going to pull the models from. We have a whole list of field types that we support from Sitecore. This is in config so that we can expand this without having to recompile the main code there. So we have different wrappers for all the different field types in Sitecore, and if you wanted a custom one, it's fairly easy to implement that there. So if we go to where the models live. Now in this project I'm using code generation. This is a Unicorn based project, so we're using Unicorn for serialization. You can use TDS as well for serialization and use the code generation within TDS. In this case we're just using the straight T4 template from within Visual Studio. So on our T4 template I can just run the custom tool and it generates my model class, which I have open here. So this is a base Sitecore model. As I said, we are a wrapper for your Sitecore API. So it's not a straight POCO, but it does wrap all the various points in the Sitecore API or on your item that you're going to want to interact with. So you can hand code these models, but they hand doing it can get tedious after a while. So code gen is probably the preferred way to do it. And you can see here we have, in this instance, we have a template called assets. We have an interface for it. We implement any interfaces that this inherits, and then we have a concrete implementation. You work with the interfaces. It's very rare that you would work directly with the concrete implementation, but the concrete implementation allows us to, or allows Fortis to create that object there. Now if I just open up Sitecore here. So the little demos we're going to look at is quick navigation and then a little demo of how we can use the search API as well. So in navigation here we have some base templates that build up a navigation. We have our fields on the templates that we can use, and then if we look through in our model here, I'll just we can see the navigation interface has all been built out for us using our code gen, and we have the navigation concrete implementation. What we can do then in our navigation is in our controller, is we can use our controller to build up our view model. Some cases you can use the model that Fortis builds. You can pass that straight to your view. That's one way to go. I tend to prefer building a view model that is more directly aimed at the Raibow script, the view that I'm using. So in this case, I've built a navigation view model, and in my service here, I'm now using Fortis to pull out the navigation items that I need to build up my menu. So in this case here, I know my template is going to be our navigation. Now in Sitecore, if I just go back here, navigation is not necessarily a page. It can just be a piece of data sitting anywhere, or it can be on a page. So if I have a look at the page type here, so a general content page will include navigation. So because it uses the interfaces, and because all of the interfaces that a template inherits are implemented on the main interface, so iContent page will implement iNavigation. We can then just call that or use the iNavigation template to pull the items out from Sitecore and cast them as whatever the interface is that we want to work with. So we don't need to use the whole item all of the time. We don't need to be passing around huge big classes all the time. We can just limit that to whatever interface we want to use. And obviously because we're using that interface there and it's strongly typed, we can then use that strongly typed data to filter down where we need to, or we can use that in our view. So if we have a look at a view model here, sorry, our Razor script, we pass in the view model and we can use the strongly typed properties of that to render out the fields. Now with Fortis, we can just straight use the fields here. So if I go down to our loop here, we can see nav item is an iNavigation item. So if I want to render another property of that, I can type that in and say I want the navigation title. I can just use that property and render it out. Obviously it needs the @ symbol. Now we can just leave it there. The navigation title, it uses the when MVC, when you call this, it uses the two HTML string. So that automatically calls the Sitecore render field pipeline. If we want to do something more fancy, we can call the render directly and then pass parameters in. This would be very similar to if you were using the html.sitecore.field method, where you can pass parameters into it. You can see, for example, in this navigation URL render here, we're passing in a CSS class. So this will get rendered as an anchor tag with all of the properties of the navigation URL, and we're telling it what the CSS class is that we want to use. So a little error there. So all of the different field types that we have, we can pass in extra parameters to customize how our markup is going to display. Yes, I forgot to turn off Slack while presenting. So where are we? Right, so we work in with the interfaces. It's good to know as well that with Fortis, like Glass, we're not just a one-way. It is a two-way, so if we want to save data back into Sitecore, we can use those strongly typed properties. Each item has a navigate as a save method. So that just uses the Sitecore API inside to update the item back in Sitecore. So if we look at the view renderings, Razor scripts here. So our view renderings, we have a pipeline in Fortis. So let me just load that up. Config. So we have an extra pipeline in the MVC, get model pipeline, extra processor, and this gets the model from the view. So rather than using a straight or a controller rendering all of the time to use Fortis, you can also use a view rendering. In the Razor script, you would just set your model. So if I went into one here, instead of using a main model, you could set your model to an eye rendering context in Fortis, and then you can tell it what you're expecting from the interface. So in this case, maybe I want an eye navigation, and that will then automatically pull out the corresponding data from the item. If it doesn't match the interface that you're requesting, the model is going to be null. But if it does match, if the rendering item or the data source item matches that interface that you've requested on your rendering context, you'll have that model there automatically populated straight into your view rendering. So you don't need to always use a controller rendering. How am I doing for time, actually? You can't hear me. Okay, well let's go into a bit of a search example. So because Fortis wraps the Sitecore API, you do have access to all of the standard features that you would in Sitecore through the Fortis API. So if I go and find, where did I have it? So this is an example of how we would use the Sitecore Search API inside Fortis. So Fortis has an item search factory. This search manager thing is just an internal thing. It pulls out the correct Sitecore index based on our current context. So that's using the Sitecore iProvider search context. Once we have the search context, we use the item search factory to just build our query up. And this is fairly similar to how you would do it using the straight Sitecore API. But again, because we're using the strongly typed models, we can then search on all of the properties that are on our template nice and easily. And when this gets returned out, all of the items are going to be cast as the interface that we have selected. So actually the syntax is very similar to using standard Sitecore, but we get the Fortis object that is returned to us. So again, when we're using that in our Razor script or we're using that in our controllers, anywhere we're getting that the benefits of that strongly typing and better quality of code, because we can run that in our unit tests. The other advantage of Fortis is we can create unit tests for it. Because we can mock things like the item factory or the item search factory, or we can even mock different items if we wanted to, we could create unit tests for all of these nice and simply. So we don't have to worry about delving into the Sitecore code itself. It's just nice, straightforward .NET unit testing. So that's a basic quick overview of Fortis. There's a lot to it. So we could go into this in a lot more depth with more time. It's used in quite a number of sites now. It's used in some quite big sites as well. One of them is easily serving 30 to 40 million page hits every month, so performance is very good, and it's been proven in some quite large implementations. So it's got a good history, and it's a good option to use if you're looking at using one of the ORMs or the wrappers. How am I doing for time, Akshay?
Oh, sorry, I'm on double mute. You're done with time, but you could take a couple of minutes to wrap it up if you want.
Okay, so all right. Well, but basically, okay, so to wrap it up, benefits of using Fortis, it's the same, similar to the benefits of using Synthesis and Glass. Using an ORM or a wrapper, it's going to make your code quality better. You can unit test, and it makes development quicker. It also reduces the complexity of your code. You're not going to have magic strings dotted around and all the pain that provides. Fortis is a nice option. The code generation tools are really good. If you like code generation and you like to have a good representation of your Sitecore database in your code, Fortis is definitely a great option for that. It is nice and clear as you're using Fortis. Your models that you're working with really do relate to how you built your templates. So for me, that makes development nice and easy because I can relate the Sitecore database to my code without having to worry about which models are mapping. If you prefer mapping, you can then also create your own view models on top of that to map to a simpler view model that you want to do. It supports search with both Solar and Lucene, and it's got good performance, and that's Fortis. I'll hand you back over to Akshay.
All right, thank you so much, Richard. All right, guys, so let me get back to my screen. All right, cool. So thank you so much for all the panelists showing their code and their projects. It's really helpful to all of us, and we'll be putting up the video of it once it's done processing. The other thing Alan mentioned, which is a good idea, is to put Q&A as part of it, which we're going to do that as well as part of this. So all of that will go on the post, as well as we have another one scheduled pretty soon on the 28th. So that's session 4, talks about presentation and some of the admin stuff you could do. So it's available for registration if anyone wants to do it. Lastly, if I don't show this, Mike's going to kill me. So here's his animated GIF he would like to show. Thanks again for attending. Hope this was useful. Thanks, guys.